What if the very thing you're chasing, success, strength, clarity, has been silently leaking from your life every time you give in to fleeting pleasure? Imagine this, a man with boundless potential, trapped in cycles of lust, wondering why his focus fades, why his ambition softens, why the fire inside him keeps dimming. It's not magic, it's biology. No, it's deeper than that. It's psyche. You were never meant to waste your power in moments of impulsive release. You were meant to build it, contain it, direct it. Think of abstinence not as denial, but as a transformation chamber where raw desire is forged into purpose, vision, and control. Sounds intense. Good. It should be. Because what we're about to uncover isn't a motivational cliché, it's a psychological awakening that could rattle your very foundation. So buckle up, breathe deep, and try not to laugh when you realize how long you've been giving away your strength for nothing but a few seconds of escape. Stay with me. What comes next might just make you uncomfortable enough to finally evolve. Sexual abstinence, when practiced with awareness and intention, is not merely the act of suppressing desire, it is the deliberate redirection of one of the most powerful life forces that exists within us. Sexual energy is not limited to the bedroom or the act of reproduction. It is the raw, unfiltered fuel of our very being. It is the pulse that drives ambition, creativity, imagination, intuition, and the pursuit of mastery. When we allow this energy to spill out constantly through compulsive indulgence, we rob ourselves of its deeper potential. But when we hold it, when we channel it inward rather than outward, something remarkable happens, something ancient and alchemical. The same force that seeks release becomes the fire that forges our inner strength. It begins to rise, not in frustration but in transformation, feeding the higher centers of the mind and opening pathways of thought and clarity we didn't know were blocked. Throughout history, men of influence, artists, warriors, inventors, philosophers, were not defined by mere abstention but by transmutation. They understood that sexual energy could either control you or serve you, but not both. In the modern world, flooded with distractions and hyperstimulation, abstinence becomes a rebellion, a sacred protest against the slavery of pleasure. Each time you say no to momentary desire, you are in fact saying yes to long-term growth. This conscious redirection fuels an internal engine of willpower that begins to manifest outwardly. Suddenly your thoughts become more focused, your vision clearer, and your work more meaningful. You are no longer scattered by urges, you are gathered, aligned, intentional. This isn't just psychological posturing, the biochemical shifts in the brain confirm it. Dopamine levels balance, testosterone stabilizes, and the mind is no longer hijacked by the roller coaster of instant gratification. It becomes a still pool, reflective and aware, capable of deep thought and profound insight. Creativity begins to awaken in surprising ways. The ideas that once felt clouded by mental fog now arrive with clarity and confidence. You feel inspired not by fantasy, but by purpose. Projects that were once delayed out of procrastination or fatigue now feel magnetic. There is a renewed drive to build, to express, to conquer. Intellectual power is not just the accumulation of knowledge, it is the disciplined use of attention, and nothing enhances attention like the practice of restraint. The same energy that once scattered your focus across meaningless indulgence now flows like a river through the channels of creation. You begin to write with more conviction, speak with more power, and act with more direction. People notice, not because you told them you're abstinent, but because your presence changes. There's something grounded in your posture, something alert in your eyes. You no longer chase validation, you radiate authority. The psychological clarity that emerges from abstinence is not merely the absence of distraction, it's the presence of a deeper awareness. You begin to observe yourself differently. The emotional impulses that once dominated you start to lose their grip. You no longer react to every feeling. You respond with intention. The mental chatter quiets, the compulsive cravings weaken, and what remains is a cleaner, clearer sense of self. You begin to understand the mechanics of your own mind, the triggers, the voids, the compulsions that used to own you, and in that understanding there is power. A man who can master his sexual impulses is a man who can master any aspect of his life, for it is in that mastery that true freedom is found, not in repression, but in redirection. The energy is not destroyed, it is transformed. This transformation is not always easy. It demands confrontation with the shadow, with the part of yourself that hungers for escape, for pleasure, for numbness. But the longer you walk the path, the more you see that those impulses are not your enemy. They are raw data, unprocessed energy waiting to be sculpted. Each urge becomes a test, a doorway into discipline. Each denial becomes a deposit into your future. You begin to understand that the creative life is not a side effect of talent, but the result of energy being held, shaped, and refined. Intellectual breakthroughs are no longer accidental. They are the natural outcome of a mind undistracted, rooted in presence and purpose. What once drained you now fuels you. What once distracted you now sharpens you. Sexual abstinence is not about denying your humanity. It is about discovering how deep and powerful that humanity truly is when not fragmented by compulsion. It is not the absence of pleasure, but the cultivation of purpose. And as this purpose grows, you find yourself more alive, more aware, more able to channel your energy into something that outlasts the moment. Creativity becomes not a random spark, but a steady flame. Intelligence becomes not a collection of thoughts, but the ability to see clearly, act boldly, and lead with vision. The energy that once left your body now fills it with direction, insight, and an inner fire that few ever touch because they were too busy chasing what you chose to master. Withholding gratification is not about suppressing desire, but about reorienting your relationship with it. It is the decision to pause, to restrain, and to delay indulgence in favor of a higher goal. This choice, though simple on the surface, generates profound shifts within the mind and spirit. In a world that tempts you to act on every impulse, every craving, and every emotion, the act of restraint becomes a revolutionary discipline. It breaks the cycle of automatic behaviors and forces you to become conscious of your inner landscape. You begin to see just how much of your energy is leaked into distractions and short-term pleasures that offer momentary relief but leave long-term dissatisfaction. Every time you choose not to give in, you are not losing something. You are training the inner muscle of control, and that control bleeds into every other part of your life. The first thing that begins to change is your relationship with discomfort. Where most people run from it, you begin to face it. You sit with the urge instead of feeding it. You endure the tension rather than dissolving it. And in that moment, something starts to shift inside you. Your mind, which once screamed for immediate gratification, starts to calm. The storm passes. You survive. And what's left is a deeper trust in yourself. You realize you are not at the mercy of your emotions. You are not a puppet pulled by urges. You are capable of choice, of patience, of control. That realization is more empowering than any temporary pleasure because it marks the beginning of self-mastery. This mastery becomes the foundation of discipline. Discipline is not a personality trait. It is a byproduct of consistent restraint. It is built every time you choose to follow your principles rather than your preferences. When you wake up early despite the urge to sleep, when you work on your craft instead of scrolling endlessly, when you say no to the easy path because you're committed to the right one, each of those moments strengthens your internal compass. And what grows from this compass is an unshakable sense of direction. You know what you want, you know why it matters, and more importantly, you begin to trust yourself to follow through. That trust is not gifted, it is earned. Earned through 100 small choices, each one a step away from chaos and a step toward clarity. Control, then, is not about domination, it is about sovereignty. It is about owning your time, your energy, your attention. It's knowing that you have the power to choose how you respond, rather than being tossed around by every whim or distraction. When you stop acting on every impulse, your life stops being reactionary and starts being intentional. You become the author rather than the character. And that authorship allows you to shape your days with purpose. Your productivity increases, not because you're trying harder, but because you're less scattered. Your focus sharpens, your actions align with your goals, and your results begin to speak for themselves. People notice. They sense something different, not arrogance but grounded authority. This inner authority is not loud. It does not boast or seek validation. It radiates. It exists in the calm you carry when others are panicking. It lives in your ability to say no without explanation, to stand firm without aggression, to lead without seeking applause. It's what makes others look at you and wonder how you stay so centered while they feel so reactive. That kind of authority is rare because it requires sacrifice. It requires discomfort. It requires saying no to the things that feel good in the moment so you can build something that feels right in the long run. And because so few are willing to pay that price, those who do become powerful beyond measure, not through force, but through alignment. The irony is that the more you practice restraint, the more freedom you actually experience. Not freedom to indulge, but freedom from the need to. You no longer depend on external sources for your sense of peace or satisfaction. You become self-sufficient. You can sit in silence without anxiety. You can face temptation without fear. You can delay gratification without resentment. And in that delay, you find deeper joys. Joys not built on impulse, but on achievement, growth, and integrity. The feeling of following through on your word, of earning what you desire, of building something meaningful, those are joys that no indulgence can imitate. And while the world might call you extreme or disciplined or even rigid, what they don't see is the freedom you've found on the other side. They don't see how peaceful your mind is because it's not pulled in 1,000 directions. They don't see how light you feel without the baggage of addiction or regret. They don't see how focused you are because your energy isn't divided. What they do see, eventually, is the result. The confidence in your voice, the integrity in your choices, the consistency in your actions. That's when they begin to wonder what you're doing differently. And all you did was learn to pause, to withhold, to wait. Not because you're weak or afraid, but because you've discovered something stronger than pleasure, purpose. Abstinence is far more than the refusal of a physical act. It is the key that unlocks hidden layers of the mind, revealing a depth of potential that often lies dormant beneath the surface of indulgence. When you choose abstinence, particularly in the realm of sexual energy, you are not just closing a door to gratification, you are opening a portal into your unconscious world, a place where instincts, desires, traumas, fears, archetypes, and brilliance are entangled. This inner world is powerful, but it remains inaccessible to those who are constantly chasing stimulation and escaping discomfort. Abstinence forces you to stop running, to turn inward, and to listen to what your mind and body are truly communicating. In that silence, in that restraint, the unconscious begins to speak. The modern world is built to keep the unconscious suppressed. Endless distractions, overstimulation, and indulgence keep you locked in a shallow relationship with yourself. The moment you remove a major source of stimulation, sexual gratification, you start to realize how much of your behavior was driven by compulsion. Patterns emerge. Emotional triggers come into focus. You begin to witness how urges arise, not randomly, but as responses to inner emptiness or unresolved wounds. This awareness is the first step to psychological clarity. You're no longer swept away by unseen forces. You're finally observing them. And in that observation, a new form of power is born, the power of self-awareness. This self-awareness sharpens your perception, not just of your internal world, but also of the external world. You start to see through illusions, manipulations, and the false promises that once seduced you. You recognize how much your decisions were influenced by desire rather than direction. Without the fog of indulgence, the landscape of your life becomes clearer. You see which relationships drain you, which habits limit you, which goals are authentic, and which are imitations of someone else's dream. The sharpening of this inner lens allows you to act from truth rather than temptation. You are no longer pulled in a dozen directions. You begin to move with precision and purpose. In this heightened state of awareness, the unconscious begins to release gifts that were once locked away. Intuition sharpens, dreams become more vivid, and insights arrive uninvited. Your mind starts connecting dots faster, seeing patterns that others overlook. What was once noise becomes signal. This is not fantasy. It's the natural consequence of rebalanced energy. When sexual energy is not expelled but transmuted, it rises through the psyche, feeding higher centers of creativity, insight, and spiritual sensitivity. The mind that was once dulled by overindulgence now feels electric, alert, and alive. It's as if a new intelligence awakens, one that was always there but buried under layers of distraction. This new intelligence also includes emotional clarity. You begin to differentiate between real connection and shallow attraction. You become aware of how much validation you once sought through physical intimacy or fantasy. With abstinence, you reclaim your emotional independence. You no longer need someone else to complete you or distract you. Instead, you start to enjoy your own company. You sit with your emotions without needing to escape. You learn the language of your feelings and the root of your longings. And in this learning, you heal. You become whole, not perfect, but grounded in a deeper understanding of yourself. The unconscious also holds your creative and visionary potential, much of which is suppressed by overstimulation. Sexual abstinence begins to unlock these vaults. You notice bursts of inspiration, new ideas, or a sudden drive to create, build, or express. This is the mind's way of redirecting energy. What was once used to chase pleasure is now fueling your purpose. This is the true essence of transmutation, the raw force of desire being refined into art, wisdom, or achievement. The more you practice abstinence, the more you notice that your work feels richer, your thoughts more original, your sense of identity more defined. You are becoming who you were meant to be before the world trained you to constantly seek escape. There is also a spiritual dimension to this clarity. When the noise of indulgence fades, the silence becomes sacred. You begin to hear a deeper voice within, a voice that is not reactive, not needy, but wise. You sense that you are connected to something greater, something timeless. This doesn't always translate into religious belief, but it often brings a sense of purpose that feels beyond logic. You wake up with direction. You go to bed with gratitude. You feel as though you're being guided by something deeper than desire, a mission, a calling, a truth that demands your full attention. Abstinence becomes not just a practice, but a path. Walking this path is not always easy. The unconscious will test you. Old patterns will rise to the surface. Doubt will whisper in your ear. But each moment of restraint is a confrontation with the self you no longer want to be. And with each victory, no matter how small, you carve a new identity, one forged in discipline, clarity, and power. You're not just resisting the world, you're reclaiming yourself from it. You're peeling back the layers of programming to discover your original blueprint, the man or woman you were before fear, lust, and weakness clouded your vision. Abstinence, then, is not about deprivation. It is about awakening. It is about the fierce decision to stop bleeding your power into the temporary and start investing it into the eternal. The clarity that comes is not given, it is earned. Earned through discomfort, through solitude, through the deep work of confronting your shadows. But what emerges from that work is not just a better version of yourself, it is your truest self, standing in the light of full awareness, finally ready to shape the world instead of being shaped by it. True masculine transformation does not begin in comfort, indulgence, or self-gratification. It begins in the exact opposite space, where pleasure is consciously restrained, where desire is acknowledged but not obeyed, and where the man decides to sit in the fire of his own hunger without reaching for immediate relief. This is not a denial of manhood, but the purification of it, because real strength is not proven by how much you can take from the world, but by how much you can withhold when everything in you screams to surrender. The moment you choose to delay pleasure, to pause before acting on every impulse, is the moment you reclaim the most primal form of power, self-control, and that control becomes the foundation of transformation. Transformation is not an aesthetic. It is a war within, a war between the boy who chases comfort and the man who chooses discipline. Masculinity, in its deepest essence, is not about dominance over others, but about mastery over self. Every time you resist the lure of fleeting pleasure, you sharpen your edge. You confront the weakness within that seeks to be pacified by pleasure. Whether it's lust, distraction, laziness, or comfort, these things, when unchecked, become the silent killers of ambition, clarity, and purpose. But when you consciously choose to restrain them, not out of guilt but out of purpose, you begin the real work of building your character. You stop being reactive. You begin to become dangerous, not because you seek harm, but because you are no longer ruled by the same temptations that enslave the average man. There is a profound shift that occurs when a man looks at the thing he desires most and walks away from it, not because he doesn't feel the pull, but because he understands something greater is at stake. That's where the myth ends and the journey begins. It's the journey of building a life not dictated by urges, but defined by mission. In this space, masculinity becomes sharp, awake, aware. The distractions that once consumed hours begin to lose their appeal. The mind clears, focus returns. Time slows down and stretches out, as if the universe itself starts aligning with your discipline. Because in truth, the universe responds not to your fantasies but to your decisions. And when you decide to sacrifice pleasure for purpose, you begin to live in alignment with the core archetype of the warrior, the creator, the leader, the man who acts with intention, not impulse. The process of restraining pleasure is not easy. It's not supposed to be. That's why it transforms. Pain is the price of growth. Hunger is the gate to discipline. And the more you walk this path, the more you realize that masculinity was never about consuming more. It was about becoming more, becoming the kind of man whose presence speaks louder than his words. A man who doesn't need approval because he has internal authority. A man who can sit with his own chaos without needing someone or something to soothe it. This type of man is rare because this type of path is brutal. It requires you to see where you've been weak, where you've compromised, where you've lied to yourself, and it demands that you stand up, look those parts in the face and say, not anymore. Restraining pleasure teaches patience, and patience gives birth to wisdom. It trains your nervous system to stay calm in the storm. It rewires your brain to stop seeking constant reward and start building lasting fulfillment. And when this shift happens, something sacred awakens inside, a sense of dignity. Not the kind that comes from success or status, but the quiet dignity of knowing you didn't take the easy way out. That you suffered, endured, and refined yourself in the fire of self-discipline. You begin to hold your head higher, not out of pride, but because you've earned your own respect. And that respect cannot be bought, borrowed, or faked. It must be forged in restraint. This transformation isn't just internal, it changes the way the world sees you. People begin to respond differently, not because you told them you've changed, but because energy doesn't lie. There's a gravity in your presence, a sharpness in your focus, a certainty in your movement. You speak less, but say more. You chase less, but attract more. Why? Because the man who restrains his pleasure holds a secret energy. He is full, not empty. He is in control, not craving. He is overflowing with unused, redirected power, and that power shows. It manifests in work, relationships, leadership, and even silence. It's what separates the boy who wants from the man who earns. To consciously restrain pleasure is not to become cold or detached. It's to become more deeply connected to life in a way most never experience. You begin to feel more, not less. You become more attuned to your instincts, not ruled by them. You can desire without acting. You can imagine without escaping. You can be surrounded by temptation and still remain rooted in your mission. And that is the mark of true transformation, not immunity to emotion, but sovereignty over it. You feel deeply, yet you choose wisely. You want intensely, yet you act intentionally. You become a man not driven by pleasure, but defined by presence. And in that presence, you discover that what you thought you were sacrificing was never the real reward. Pleasure, comfort, gratification, these were just echoes of what you truly longed for. Mastery, power, purpose, and peace. These do not come from indulgence. They come from the fire, from choosing restraint, again and again, until it becomes your nature. Until your soul becomes lean, your will becomes unbreakable, and your life becomes a reflection of the discipline that shaped it from the inside out.